Blood is composed of a clear straw-colored watery fluid called the plasma, in which the different types of blood cells are suspended. The plasma constitutes 55% of the volume of blood, while the remaining 45% is accounted for by the cellular components of blood. Blood makes up 7% of the body weight of management. This proportion is less in women, while it is greater in children, and it is gradually decreasing until the adult level is reached. The objectives of this lesson are to understand and discuss the structure and functions of the cellular components of blood, and number 2, to learn the components that are present in the plasma. Functions of blood. Number 1 is a nutrient function. This is the most important function of the blood. Nutritive substances like glucose, amino acids, lipids, and vitamins derived from the digested food are absorbed from the gastrointestinal tract and carried by the blood to different parts of the body for growth as well as for the production of energy. The second function is the respiratory function. The transport of respiratory gases is carried out by the blood. It carries oxygen from the alveoli of the lungs to the different tissues all over the body, and carbon dioxide from the tissues back to the alveoli. Coming to the excretory function, the waste products that are formed in the tissues during various metabolic activities are removed by blood and carried to the excretory organs like kidney, skin, liver, etc. for excretion. Next is the transport function. The hormones that are secreted by the ductless glands are released directly into the blood, and the blood transports them to the target organs or the tissues. Blood also transports various enzymes. The next function carried out by the blood is a water balance. The water content of the blood is freely interchangeable with the interstitial fluid. This helps in the maintenance of water balance. The blood is also responsible for the maintenance of acid-base balance. The plasma proteins as well as the hemoglobin act as buffers and help in the regulation of acid-base balance. Blood is also involved in body temperature. The blood regulates the body temperature because of its high specific heat. Coming to the storage function, blood serves as a ready-made source of water and some important substances like sodium, potassium, and glucose. The next function is the defensive function. Blood plays a very important role in the defense system of the body. The next aspect that we are going to see in blood is about the cellular components. There are 3 types of cells which are present in the blood. Number 1 is the red blood cells, which is also called as the erythrocytes. Number 2, the white blood cells or the leucocytes. Number 3, the platelets or the thrombocytes. Now we'll see each one by one. First one is the erythrocyte or the RBCs. The morphology of erythrocytes is that they are disc shaped and biconcave. In fact, the biconcavity is the one which is giving the disc shape to the RBCs. This contour has the following advantages. Number 1, it helps in the equal and rapid diffusion of oxygen and other substances in the cell. Number 2, the large surface area which is available in the RBC actually facilitates the absorption and removal of the substances. Number 3, the RBCs can fold easily and pass through the narrow lumen of the capillaries. Now next is the dimensions. Now if you can follow it along with the figure 1, you can see that the shape is biconcave and the size is 7 to 8 micrometers. the thickness is only 2 micrometers at the periphery, while it is 1 at the center. The surface area is 120 square meters and the volume is 85 to 90 cubic millimeters. Coming to the RBC count. In the adult males, the count is 4.5 to 6 millions per cubic millimeter of blood, while in the adult females, it is 4 to 5.5 millions per cubic millimeter of blood. And in the newborn, it is 6 to 8 millions per cubic millimeter of blood, while in the children, it is 3 to 5 millions per cubic millimeter of blood. The count is actually more in infants. This is because of hemoconcentration. This count rapidly decreases to the lowest level by 2 to 4 months, and then it slowly increases from 1 year of life to 5 millions per cubic millimeter of blood at about 10 years of age. Now, what are the properties of RBC? The first important property is the rouleau formation. The RBCs have the unique property of piling up one above the another like a pile of coins. This property of the RBC is what is called as a rouleau. Now that you can actually see the rouleau formation in this particular figure. The second property is the specific gravity. The specific gravity of RBC is 1.09 to 1.10. The third property is the packed cell volume. Its abbreviation is PCV. When the blood with the anticoagulant is collected in a centrifuge tube and centrifuged for about 30 minutes at 3000 rpm, the RBCs settle at the bottom of the tube, leaving the clear plasma at the top. The RBCs form 45% of the total blood. This is called the packed cell volume or hematocrit. The hematocrit is a reliable index of the red cell population. The next property is suspension stability. During circulation, the RBCs remain suspended uniformly in the blood. The fifth property is fragility. The tendency of the RBCs to hemolyze is called the fragility of the cells. The red cell passes about 3 lakh times through the capillaries during its lifespan, which makes a cell more fragile. The sixth property is the erythrocyte sedimentation rate, and the abbreviation is ESR. The sedimentation of erythrocytes is facilitated due to the presence of rouleau. The rate at which the red cells fall, that is sediment, is known as the ESR. Now, what are the physiological variations of RBCs? Number 1 is age. At birth, the RBC count is 8 to 10 millions per cubic millimeter of blood. The count decreases within 10 days after birth due to the destruction of RBCs, causing what is called as a physiological jaundice in some infants. However, in infants and growing children, the cell count is more than the value in adults. Next is sex. Before puberty and after menopause in females, the RBC count is similar to that of males. During the reproductive period of females, the count is less in females than in males. That is, it is 4.5 million per cubic millimeter. Next one is high altitude. The inhabitants of mountains, that is above 10,000 feet from the mean sea level, have an increased RBC count of more than 7 millions per cubic millimeter. This is due to what is called as a hypoxia, that is decreased oxygen supply to the tissues in high altitude. During hypoxia, a hormone called erythropoietin in turn stimulates the bone marrow to produce more RBCs. Number 4 is muscular exercise. There is a temporary increase in RBC count after exercise. It is because of mild hypoxia and contraction of spleen. Spleen stores small quantity of blood and therefore it is called as a reservoir of blood. Next one is the emotional condition. The RBC count is increased during the emotional conditions like anxiety because of sympathetic stimulation. The sixth one is the increased environmental temperature. The increase in the atmospheric temperature increases the RBC count. Number 7 is after meals. There is a slight increase in the RBC count after consuming a meal. Now coming to the functions of RBCs. The first function is once again transport. The main function of RBC is to carry the oxygen to all parts of the body and to bring back the carbon dioxide to the lungs. The hemoglobin in the RBC is the carrier of oxygen and carbon dioxide. For the transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide, adequate number of mature and functioning red blood cells must be available. RBC must also contain the appropriate amount of hemoglobin to carry out this function. Next is the buffering action in blood. The hemoglobin that is present in the RBC functions as a very good buffer. By this action, it regulates the hydrogen ion concentration and plays a role in the maintenance of acid-base balance. Now, what is the lifespan and fate of RBC? The lifespan of RBC is 120 days, after which they disintegrate. Their breakdown is carried out by the phagocytic reticuloendothelial cells of the spleen, the bone marrow, and the liver. As erythrocytes age, their cell membranes become more fragile and so more susceptible to hemolysis. The destroyed RBCs are fragmented. From the fragmented parts, the hemoglobin is released and degraded into iron, globin, and porphyrin. The iron that is released by hemolysis is retained in the body and stored as ferritin and reused in the bone marrow to form new hemoglobin molecules. The porphyrin is degraded and forms the pigment called bilirubin. It is almost completely reduced to the yellow pigment bilirubin before being bound to plasma globin and transported to the liver. In the liver, it is changed from a fat soluble to a water soluble form to be excreted as a constituent of bile. It enters the intestines and gets converted to strechobilinogen and then to strechobilin and finally excreted through the fecal matter. Part of it is absorbed through the blood and carried to the kidneys, where it is converted to urobilinogen and then to urobilin and finally excreted through the urine. Now, the next cellular component present in the blood are the leukocytes. The white blood cells, the abbreviation being WBC or leukocytes, are the colorless and nucleated formed elements of blood. These cells are larger in size and the number is less compared to that of RBCs. Yet, functionally, these cells are as important as erythrocytes. Leukocytes play a very important role in the defense mechanism of the body and protect the body from the invading organisms by acting like soldiers. Coming to the classification. Some of the WBCs have granules in the cytoplasm. Based on the presence or absence of granules in the cytoplasm, the leukocytes are classified into two types. That is the granulocytes, which have the granules in the cytoplasm. They are three types: neutrophils, eosinophils, and basophils. Agranulocytes, which do not have the granules in the cytoplasm, are the monocytes and the lymphocytes. Now, what are the granulocytes? Coming to more details about them, the neutrophils, which are also known as polymorphs, have fine or small granules in the cytoplasm. The granules take up acidic as well as basic stains. When they are stained with Leishman stain, which contain acidic eosin and basic methylene blue, the granules actually appear violet in color. The nucleus is multilobed, which we already saw in the picture. The number of lobes in the nucleus are about 2 to 5, and the diameter of the cell is 10 to 12 microns. The neutrophils are amoeboid in character. The next one are the eosinophils. The eosinophils have coarse and larger granules in the cytoplasm which stain orange with eosin. The nucleus is bilobed and spectacle shaped. The diameter of the cell varies between 10 and 14 microns. The third one are the basophils. The basophils also have coarse granules in the cytoplasm. The granules stain purple blue with methylene blue. The nucleus is bilobed and the diameter of the cell ranges between 8 to 10 microns. The next one classification are the agranulocytes. Now, among the agranulocytes, we have the first one being the monocytes. The monocytes are the largest leukocytes with a diameter of 14 to 18 microns. Now, this also we saw in the diagram. The cytoplasm is very clear without any granules. The nucleus is round, oval or horseshoe shaped or kidney shaped. The nucleus is either in the center of the cell or it is pushed towards one side and a large amount of cytoplasm is seen. Next is the lymphocytes. Like monocytes, the lymphocytes also do not have granules in the cytoplasm. The nucleus is oval or kidney shaped, occupying the whole of the cytoplasm. Depending upon the size, the lymphocytes are divided into two groups. Number one is a large lymphocytes, which are the younger cells with a diameter of 10 to 12 microns. And number two, the smaller lymphocytes, they are actually the older cells with a diameter of 7 to 10 microns. Depending upon the function, the lymphocytes are divided into two types. Number one, the T lymphocytes, which are concerned with cellular immunity. Number two, the B lymphocytes, which are concerned with the humoral immunity. Now, what is the normal white blood cell count? The total WBC count is 4,000 to 11,000 per cubic millimeter of blood. And the differential WBC count, that is clearly given in table 1. Now, you can see the values of the different types of WBCs, that is the neutrophils, the basophils, the eosinophils, the lymphocytes, etc. So, from the values you actually know which one is larger in the cytoplasm. Now, what are the variations in the WBC count? The increase in leukocyte count is known as leukocytosis, whereas the decrease in the count is known as leukopenia. Now, what are the physiological variations of WBCs? Number one is age. The WBC count is about 20,000 per cubic millimeter in infants and about 10,000 to 15,000 cubic millimeter in children. In adult, it ranges between 4,000 and 11,000 per cubic millimeter of blood. Sex. It is actually slightly more in males than in females. The diurnal variations. It is minimum in early in the morning and maximum in the afternoon. And during sleep, the count decreases, while during exercise, it increases slightly. Emotional conditions also increases the count, and in pregnancy also the count increases. Now, what are the functions of WBCs? First, about the neutrophils. The neutrophils play an important role in the defense mechanism of the body. Along with monocytes, they form the first line of defense against the invading microorganisms. They are attracted in large numbers to an area of infection. They are highly mobile and wander freely through the tissues. The granules of neutrophils contain the enzymes which destroy the microorganisms. The membrane of neutrophils contains an enzyme which is responsible for the bactericidal action of neutrophils. Eosinophils, although capable of phagocytosis, are less active than neutrophils. Their specified role appears to be in the elimination of parasites. Therefore, their count increases during parasitic infections and allergic conditions. The eosinophils are responsible for detoxification, disintegration, and removal of foreign proteins. Number 3, basophils. Basophils play an important role in the healing process. They also play an important role in acute hypersensitivity reaction, that is allergy. This is because of the presence of IgE receptors on the basophil membrane. Monocytes. Monocytes are actively motile and phagocytic in nature. They wander freely through all the tissues of the body. Monocytes play an important role in the defense of the body. Along with neutrophils, they provide the first line of defense. Monocytes secrete interleukin, that is IL-1, colony stimulating factor, that is MCSF, and platelet activating factor, PAF. Next, the lymphocytes. Lymphocytes play an important role in immunity. Functionally, the lymphocytes are classified into 2 categories, namely T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. T lymphocytes are responsible for the development of cellular immunity, while B lymphocytes for humoral immunity. Now coming to the third cellular component, they are the platelets or the thrombocytes. Platelets are very small, colorless, non-nucleated and moderately refractive bodies. They are 2 to 4 micrometers in diameter and the volume is 7.5 cubic microns. They are derived from the fragments of cytoplasm of megakaryocytes. The platelets are spherical or rod shaped and become oval or disc shaped. Sometimes they are of dumbbell shape, comma shape, cigar shape, or any other unusual shape. They have a cell membrane, microtubules, and cytoplasm. The normal platelet count is 250,000 per cubic millimeter of blood. Now, what are the physiological variations of platelets? Number 1 is age. Platelets are less in newborn infants and reaches normal level at the 3rd month after birth. Sex. There is no difference in the platelet count between males and females. High altitude. The platelet count increases in high altitude. And after meals, the platelet count increases. Normally, the platelets are inactive and execute their activity only when they are called for. The first one is a role in blood clotting. The platelets are responsible for the formation of the intrinsic prothrombin factor. This is responsible for the onset of blood clotting as well as for the release of thromboplastin. Then its role in clot retraction. In the blood clot, the blood cells including platelets are entrapped in between the fibrin threads. The cytoplasm of the platelets contain contractile proteins, namely actin, myosin, and thrombostenin. The contractile proteins are responsible for the clot retraction. Number 3, the role in plug formation. Platelets accelerate the process of hemostasis by constriction of blood vessels and forming a temporary seal, the platelet plug. The platelet plug formation is usually complete within 6 minutes after injury. Then its role in repair of ruptured blood vessels. The platelet derived from growth factor formed in the cytoplasm of platelets is useful for the repair of endotherin and other structure of the ruptured blood vessels. Its role in defense mechanism. By the property of agglutination, the platelets encircle the foreign bodies and destroy them by phagocytosis. The lifespan of platelets. The lifespan of platelets is only 10 days. They are destroyed by tissue macrophage system in the spleen. Then coming to the plasma. The plasma is made up of water, 90 to 92%, and dissolved and suspended substances including plasma proteins, salt, nutrients, waste material, hormone and gases. The plasma proteins make up 7% of the plasma. They are responsible for creating the osmotic pressure of blood, which keeps the plasma fluid within the circulation. The viscosity of plasma is due to plasma proteins. The most abundant plasma protein is albumin, and its main role is to maintain the plasma osmotic pressure. Globulin is another plasma protein which functions as antibodies. It carries hormones and inhibits some proteolytic enzymes. The serum is plasma from which the clotting factors have been removed. The most abundant clotting factor is fibrinogen. The plasma has the electrolytes calcium and sodium, which are responsible for the muscular contraction, transmission of nerve impulses, and maintenance of acid-base balance. It also has the products of digestion, namely glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, and glycerol. Then waste products, namely urea, creatinine, and uric acid, as well as the hormones and gases. What are the functions of plasma? The first function is coagulation of blood. The fibrinogen is responsible for the coagulation of blood. Next, defense mechanism. The gamma globulins play an important role in the defense mechanism of the body by acting as antibodies. These proteins are also called as immunoglobulins. Next is the transport mechanism. The plasma proteins are essential for the transport of various substances in blood. Albumin, alpha globulin, and beta globulin are responsible for the transport of hormones, enzymes, etc. Number 4 is the maintenance of osmotic pressure of blood. Because of the large size, the plasma proteins cannot pass through the capillary membrane easily and remain in the blood. In the blood, these proteins exert the colloidal osmotic pressure. The osmotic pressure exerted by the plasma proteins is about 25 millimeters of mercury. The fifth function is acid-base balance, where it has got a buffering action. Sixth one is viscosity of blood. The plasma proteins provide viscosity to the blood, which is very important in the maintenance of the blood pressure. Erythrocyte sedimentation rate, given by the abbreviation ESR. The globulin and fibrinogen, which are present in the plasma, accelerate the tendency of rouleau formation by the red blood cells. Next is the suspension stability of RBCs. During circulation, the red blood cells remain suspended uniformly in the blood. This property of the red blood cells is called as the suspension stability. Production of trypsin substances. The trypsin substances are necessary for the nourishment of the tissue cells in culture. These substances are produced by the leucocytes from the plasma proteins. Number 10 is a reserve protein. During fasting, inadequate food intake or inadequate protein are utilized by the body tissues as the last source of energy. Because of this, the plasma proteins are called as the reserve proteins. Now finally, to sum up, the blood is a connective tissue that is circulating in our body. This allows constant communication between the tissues that are far apart and also ensures the continuous supply of oxygen and nutrients. It carries oxygen from the lungs to all parts of the body and carbon dioxide from all parts of the body back to the lungs. The blood is known as the fluid of growth, as it carries the nutritive substances from the digestive system to all the tissues. The blood is also called as a fluid of health because it protects the body against diseases. The blood contains the blood cells, which are called the formed elements, and the liquid portion known as the plasma.